You're watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanovan. Let's see the top stories. United States and Iran agreed to a ceasefire, avoiding Trump's threat of complete devastation. At least 8 people killed and 22 injured in Israeli airstrike on southern Lebanon. And NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is meeting with Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. today. A last-minute ceasefire between the United States and Iran has halted fighting for 2 weeks and opened a narrow diplomatic window after days of intensifying tensions and threats. Both sides have called it a victory, while UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says he welcomes the announcement.
The United States and Iran have agreed to a conditional 2-week ceasefire, brokered with Pakistan just hours before a US deadline for potential large-scale strikes. President Donald Trump announced the pause on social media, saying attacks on Iran would be suspended for 2 weeks if Tehran immediately and safely reopens the strategic Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping. The ceasefire suspends military action on both sides and sets the stage for broader peace talks. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif proposed the truce, saying it would give diplomacy a chance to bring the war to a complete halt. Sharif asked the US to extend the deadline and urged Tehran to resume shipping through the strait. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran will halt attacks if the US and its allies do the same, allowing safe passage through the strait, but only with coordination from Iran's armed forces. He thanked Pakistan for mediating and stressed that the truce is temporary, not a full end to the conflict. In his official statement, Trump said the ceasefire followed talks with Sharif and Pakistan's Field Marshal Asim Munir. He called it a double-sided ceasefire, saying the US had met its military objectives. Trump added that Iran had submitted a 10-point proposal providing a workable basis for negotiations, and the 2-week pause would allow the agreement to be finalized, marking progress toward long-term peace in the Middle East. Israel backed the US pause in strikes. In a statement, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office clarified the ceasefire does not cover fighting in Lebanon, despite Pakistan's earlier claim that the truce applied everywhere, including Lebanon. Israel said it supports halting attacks only if Iran immediately reopens the strait and stops assaults on the US, Israel, and regional partners. Netanyahu added the move aligns with Trump's goal of preventing Iran from posing nuclear, missile, or terror threats to the region. Iran said talks with the US would begin Friday in Islamabad. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said in-person discussions are not yet confirmed. Analysts caution that while the pause reduces immediate risks, the broader conflict and negotiations remain fragile.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that the United States will work closely with Iran after declaring a 2-week ceasefire. In a social media post, Trump said many of the 15 points in the U.S. plan proposed to Iran have been agreed to, and that Washington will discuss tariff and sanctions relief with Tehran. He also warned that any country supplying military weapons to Iran would face a 50% tariff on goods exported to the United States immediately. Pakistan's Prime Minister says Islamabad will host delegations from the United States and Iran later this week following the ceasefire announcement between the two sides. Experts are calling the ceasefire a diplomatic win for Islamabad, but warn that talks carry high risks if they fail. Here are Mustafa has more.
On the social media platform X, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said, "I'm pleased to announce that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States, along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire in all theaters, including Lebanon and elsewhere, effective immediately." He also urged Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for 2 weeks. The ceasefire, agreed by both Iranian and U.S. leadership, has been a development welcomed across the region. Pakistani officials say all eyes are now on the Islamabad talks on Friday, which aim to turn the temporary ceasefire into lasting peace. While official delegations are unconfirmed, experts expect U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to participate. Pakistan has acted as a key intermediary in recent weeks, leveraging its historic ties with Iran. Stability in Iran is crucial for Islamabad as it shares a 900 kilometers border with Iran, and there are risks of war spillover. The country was not alone in mediating the talks. It had backing from regional powers China, Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia in brokering the ceasefire. Experts note that Islamabad still faces an uphill task bridging the deep trust gap between Washington and Tehran, with questions remaining over what the parties can agree on. Hera Mustafa, A News, Islamabad.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says a deal with Iran is possible if Tehran is willing to negotiate in good faith. His comments come after the United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan, potentially pausing weeks of fighting that have disrupted global energy supplies. The deal includes the reopening of Strait of Hormuz, a key route for global oil shipments, and has already eased pressure on markets.
What the president did is he basically issued an ultimatum to the Iranians. He said, open up the straits, stop trying to hold the world's economy hostage, and we'll engage in a ceasefire. And that's exactly the agreement that we came to last night. The Iranians have agreed to open up the straits. The United States has agreed to stop attacking. And not just the United States, but also our allies have agreed to stop attacking. And that is the basis of this fragile truce that we have, which is now, 8 to 12 hours.
Oil prices have dropped sharply after a ceasefire between the United States and Iran reopened a key global shipping route. But industry leaders warn it could take months for fuel supplies to fully recover.
Thanks for joining us this morning for...
The head of the International Air Transport Association says a full recovery in jet fuel supplies could take months, even if shipping through the Strait of Hormuz resumes.
And if it were to reopen and remain open, I think it will still take a period of months to get back to where supply needs to be, given the disruption to the refining capacity in the Middle East, which is a critical part of the global supply of refined products, and not just jet fuel, for other products as well. So it will probably take months.
Oil prices dropped sharply after the United States and Iran agreed to a conditional 2-week ceasefire, with Tehran allowing safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, a route that carries about 1/5 of global oil supply. Crude fell significantly on the announcement. Analysts say damage to refining capacity in the Middle East will slow the recovery. Airlines have been among the hardest hit, particularly in Asia, where fuel supply remains a key concern.
I think this data will help to encourage governments, or I'd like to think it will help to encourage governments to have greater energy security around a critical issue like the availability of jet, because in Asia that's the critical issue at the moment.
The ceasefire comes after weeks of escalating tensions when Iran restricted access to the strait in response to US and Israeli strikes, pushing energy prices higher and disrupting global markets. Tehran has signalled controlled maritime transit during the 2-week pause, while stressing the truce is temporary. For now, markets have stabilised, but a full recovery will depend on whether the ceasefire holds and supply chains can fully recover.
An Israeli airstrike has hit a cafe in the Lebanese city of Sidon, killing several people and injuring many others. The attack comes as a temporary ceasefire deal was announced earlier this morning in the wider regional conflict. Meantime, Israel has rejected this, stating it doesn't extend to Lebanon.
At least 8 people have been killed and 22 others injured after an Israeli airstrike targeted a cafe in the southern Lebanese port city of Sidon, according to the country's health ministry. The strike hit a busy coastal area, causing heavy damage to nearby buildings and businesses. Fires broke out after the blast, with smoke rising from vehicles and surrounding shops along the road. Dozens of residents gathered nearby as rescue efforts continued. Israel has said it plans to seize parts of southern Lebanon to create what it calls a buffer zone against Hezbollah, raising fears of a prolonged military presence and further displacement. Israeli officials say troops could remain in the area as long as there are security threats, and that key infrastructure, including several bridges over the Litani River, has been destroyed. Hezbollah has warned it will resist any attempt by Israeli forces to take control of the south, calling it an existential threat to Lebanon. The attack comes as Israeli military operations continue in southern Lebanon. The IDF said it has completed the deployment of ground troops along a strategic ridge, seen as a key position from which Hezbollah could launch anti-tank guided missiles toward Israeli communities.
As a US-Iran ceasefire raises questions over Lebanon's role, people in Beirut say they are exhausted by the conflict and are hoping the country is not left out of any deal.
Lebanese residents say they are exhausted by ongoing violence as uncertainty surrounds a US-Iran ceasefire and whether Lebanon will be included.
The clear message is that Israel does not want to stop. It seeks to continue the fighting to exert pressure across the region. Where does this lead? More conflict and more destruction. In any scenario, Lebanon should be excluded. Iran will not abandon Lebanon. As you know, Hezbollah is one of its key pillars. That is why I believe there will be significant pressure on Netanyahu to acknowledge that Lebanon is outside the conflict.
Residents in Beirut's southern suburbs say the country cannot endure further escalation.
Now Netanyahu has excluded Lebanon. There will be pressure on him, and hopefully a ceasefire will happen, because Lebanon can't take it anymore. Everything is collapsing.
Others reflect on decades of instability and hope any deal could bring a broader settlement.
I was born in 1976. Since I was born until now, not a single day has passed without war. My children are going through the same thing until now. Will it continue like this? Or will we end it, make peace, and end it? God knows. But I think there might be another agreement that includes Hezbollah in this agreement, with peace between us and Israel. That's what I believe.
Some also believe Iran will continue to back Lebanon, despite uncertainty over the ceasefire terms.
The Iranians won't let us down. They never let us down.
The Israeli military says operations against Hezbollah are continuing, while sources close to the group say it has paused fire as part of the US-Iran ceasefire.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte will meet with US President Donald Trump for what he has described as a long-planned visit. This comes after Trump's threat to leave the alliance following allies' detachment in the war in Iran.
US President Donald Trump is set to meet NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Wednesday in Washington. The meeting comes after Trump expressed frustration over the reluctance of European allies to assist the United States in the Middle East war, leading to his threat to withdraw from the Western military alliance. Analysts say Rutte's visit is likely aimed at keeping dialogue open and ensuring Europe does not fall completely off the administration's agenda.
I think it's important to understand that after the passage of more than a year of the second Trump administration, very few European senior policymakers, and that presumably includes the Secretary General of NATO himself, believe that it is possible to change the opinions of the president or change the policy course of this administration using rational arguments. So these visits by senior Europeans, like this one by Mark Rutte, are intended to keep dialogue open, to make sure that Europe doesn't drop completely off the map of this administration,
Trump also criticised traditional non-NATO allies, including South Korea, Australia and Japan, for not assisting in the Iran war. A NATO official said Rutte would seek to build on the outcome of last year's NATO summit in The Hague, where allies agreed to Trump's demand to increase defence spending, although experts say expectations for this visit are low.
But I expect Rutte to come here with very low expectations. What I do think he will really want to ensure is that American promises to continue selling weapons to Europe for passing on to Ukraine will be fulfilled, and that the funds paid by Europeans for those weapons will not be diverted, as media reports have suggested.
NATO, which includes European countries, the United States and Canada, was formed in 1949 to counter the risk of Soviet attack and has since been a cornerstone of Western security.
The Kremlin has welcomed the recent US-Iran ceasefire, saying it could free up American negotiators to return to talks on Ukraine. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters Moscow hopes the United States will have more time and capacity to participate in the trilateral peace process. He added that Russia values the peacemaking efforts of US negotiators and President Donald Trump personally.
Overall, these are not directly linked processes. They are only indirectly connected by the fact that US negotiators are currently focused on Iranian issues. We hope that in the foreseeable future, they will have more time and greater capacity to meet in the trilateral format. We are waiting for that, and we continue to highly value the peacemaking efforts of US negotiators and of President Trump personally on the Ukraine track.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we will discuss the US-Iran ceasefire and what comes next for global oil markets. Stay with us.
Defense technologies, artificial intelligence, and digital security are advancing rapidly on an international scale.
Avelsan has designed and delivered simulators of numerous military aircrafts, helicopters, and aerial platforms. From airports to stadiums, hospitals to factories, wherever video meets complexity, we add intelligence. In short, we do not merely manage videos, we turn video into decisions that protect people, assets, and cities.
Today, we will be discussing these AI initiatives, international collaborations, and future technological objectives.
Welcome back to A News. Let's continue our coverage with more in-depth analysis. A fragile calm has taken hold in one of the world's most volatile regions. A last-minute ceasefire between the United States and Iran, hailed as a victory by both sides, including Donald Trump, has temporarily halted a conflict that rattled global markets and pushed oil prices to historic highs. At the heart of the agreement is the reopening of the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply flows. The deal offers a narrow window for negotiations. Yet, beneath the surface, serious concerns remain. Intelligence agencies across Europe and North America warn the conflict may trigger a resurgence of terrorism, including lone actor attacks and proxy operations targeting Western and Israeli interests. The question now is this ceasefire a genuine turning point or just a pause before the next escalation? To unpack this, we're joined by geopolitical analyst Alexandra Martins, who is with us from Lisbon, Portugal. Ms. Martins, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, Alexandra, both Washington and Tehran are calling this a victory. Who actually gained more from this ceasefire?
Well, a lot of that is, of course, for internal consumption. I mean, Donald Trump was heavily criticized for this war. A lot of people were fearing a protracted war. They were fearing that we were witnessing the beginning of another Iraq or another Afghanistan. And the reality is that in a very short period of time, in only a few weeks, he was able to achieve quite a lot. He was able to significantly weaken the regime, to destabilize the hierarchy, and significantly reduce their military capabilities. And now, of course, by this ceasefire, he was able to reopen the Strait of Hormuz with no additional concessions, at least at this point.
So,
whereas...
Yeah, you may continue.
Regarding the Islamic regime, I think that ultimately they can very much claim that they were able not only to survive, but to sustain military pressure from both the United States and Israel, which is no small feat. So, of course, that reinforces their internal propaganda. Ultimately, I believe that what both sides are gaining more than anything else right now is time to regroup and to reorganize.
So, Alexandra, do you see this ceasefire holding, or is it simply a tactical pause?
I think that at this point, it is very much shaping up to be a tactical pause. Ultimately, a lot of the key objectives of this war have not been attained, especially regarding Iranian nuclear capability, of course. There is the big issue of the already existing stockpile of enriched uranium that has not yet been addressed. Also, right now, something that might weaken this ceasefire is the fact that Lebanon is still a point of contention, with Iran claiming that it is considered a part of the ceasefire agreement. Israel is claiming that it is not. For the time being, as we know, there are conflicts still ongoing. And also there is the point of the missile program, which has not been addressed at all, either by Iran or by the United States. And that is a key point, especially, of course, for Israel in terms of security. And we can also argue that even though it was a very isolated event, so I don't believe we can read too much into it, but it is believed that it was Hezbollah from Lebanon that targeted the US base in Cyprus. For all intents and purposes, European soil. So that is a very significant escalation as well. Not to mention the fact that Iran has intercontinental ambitions as well within its nuclear program, which might, if they were allowed to continue, put even the US in range.
What role did Pakistan play in preventing further escalation?
I believe that ultimately Pakistan acted as a diplomatic intermediary. It has a very unique position because of the fact that it has long-lasting security and military ties to the United States, while, of course, by virtue of geographic proximity, also has mutual security interests with Iran sharing a border. So also the fact that it was not an active part of this war enabled it to be the party that was able to bring both parties to the table.
Ms. Martins, how credible are warnings about a surge in terrorism following this conflict?
I believe that they are absolutely credible. First of all, because we know historically that whenever there is instability in the region, terrorist attacks in different forms do surge. There is a very big threat of lone actor groups, lone actor interventions, that might happen. There's also the fact that right after the Ayatollah Khomeini was eliminated, the Iranian clerics issued a fatwa against Americans to avenge his death. That fatwa has not been canceled either. So either by lone actors or by proxy-linked activities, there is absolutely a very real risk.
So in your view, could this conflict reshape alliances in the Middle East and beyond?
Absolutely. I think that we are already seeing a very significant shift in the region. First of all, because of the fact that the Iranian regime targeted Gulf countries, they targeted Muslim countries. Some of these countries that were very much on the fence regarding their positioning towards Israel have now taken a much more outward stance against the Iranian regime. We have already seen a progressive strengthening of the Abraham Accords, and I think that we can very much witness more and more countries becoming a part of the Abraham Accords. We also have seen that the axis with China and Russia has become very much apparent in this war and has become reinforced. We know that there is shared information, intelligence. There is also shared satellite imaging. Of course, we know that Russia has been using Iranian drones in Ukraine for a very long time. There is also some Chinese technology in Iranian missiles, and that can very much shape up as well. Ultimately, if we do see through this war, which is now on standby, but we don't know exactly which way this is going to swing, if we do see an end of the regime, there will be a weakening of the proxies in the region as well, which will be able to finally usher in stability and peace to the region in a much more long-lasting way.
Ms. Martins, Israel says Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire. How dangerous is that exclusion?
Well, that exclusion can, of course, jeopardize this ceasefire, and ultimately, Lebanon is a very significant threat to Israel. I believe that Israel was quite surprised by how strong Hezbollah remained when they finally joined this war as well. And we have also seen that they have expanded their range capabilities. They are now able to shoot rockets and missiles all the way to the south of Israel, which was not true in previous times. So I think it is a very significant threat.
So what are the implications for global oil prices and economic stability if tensions flare again?
Well, I think that we can see from what happened in the markets immediately after Donald Trump announced the ceasefire, how quick the markets are to react to news, whether they are positive or negative. So that would be the most immediate impact. And of course, like you mentioned as well in the beginning, around 20% of the oil trade goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So of course, it would have a big impact on oil prices. And then all of the domino effect that comes with, because of course, transport prices would rise, which would in turn lead to an augment in oil prices. There's also another two very key things that sometimes people don't talk about as much. There are a lot of raw materials as well for industry that go through the Strait of Hormuz that will also be affected. And maybe one of the most important ones that I would like to mention is also fertilizer, particularly for Europe. Both fertilizers and the gas that is necessary for Europe to manufacture its own fertilizers also go through the Strait of Hormuz, which of course would have an impact on agriculture as well.
And finally, what should the international community prioritize in these critical 2 weeks of diplomacy?
I think that, of course, it is always very important that the window for diplomacy is preserved. And I believe that that has been very much the case up until now as well. And I mean, even previously for years, both Israel and the United States have pursued intensively diplomatic routes. We can think, for instance, about the Obama deal, which we are very much now seeing the results of that.
Alexandra,
ultimately,
yeah, you may continue.
Yes, I think that something that would be very important as well, particularly for Europe to consider, is the necessity of this war and how important it is that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons.
So, Alexandra Martins, thank you for your insights and for being with us on the program. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. After the break, we'll take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Welcome back to A News. Now we continue with our regional stories. More than 3,000 people have been evacuated from Iran to Azerbaijan between February 28th and April 8th, according to official figures. The group includes over 500 Azerbaijani citizens alongside a large number of foreign nationals, with the highest numbers from China, Russia, India, Bangladesh and Tajikistan. The evacuations come amid heightened regional tensions following the outbreak of the conflict in late February. Iran says it will negotiate directly with the United States over the ceasefire conditions. The talks are set to take place in Islamabad amid a lingering distrust between both sides. Our Turaj Shivalilo has more from Tehran.
The Supreme National Security Council of Iran has stressed that Tehran will solely talk with the U.S. side over its ceasefire conditions laid down in a 10-point proposal relayed to the White House by Pakistani officials. As Iranian and U.S. negotiators are scheduled to meet in Islamabad, the top security authority also said that Iran will step into the negotiating room with the U.S. out of total distrust. It was referring to a precedent of the United States attacking Iran in June 2025 and last February, while Iranian and U.S. negotiators were in the middle of nuclear negotiations mediated by Oman. While the provisions of Iran's counter-proposal to the U.S. 15-point plan have not been officially disclosed, Tehran has reportedly laid out its demands on how to end the war, including a cessation of hostilities in all fronts across the region, a protocol for safe transit through the Strait of Hormuz, and war damage compensation. According to the semi-official Mehr news agency, Tehran's other conditions include accepting Iran's right to uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary and secondary U.S. economic sanctions, termination of all UN Security Council nuclear resolutions against Iran, and termination of all resolutions of International Atomic Energy Agency. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire after ramping up his threats for several weeks until they reached an alarming level of the menace of attacking Iran's civilian infrastructure, including power plants and bridges, on Tuesday. Turaj Shivalilo from Tehran for A News.
Turkey is setting out an ambitious new target in defense exports as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan signals a major push to elevate the country's position in the global market over the coming years. Here are the details.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Tuesday that Turkey hopes to be among the world's top 10 exporters of defense technology within the coming 2 years. Erdogan was speaking at the inauguration of a new missile production facility operated by Turkish defense firm Roketsan. According to the Turkish leader, Ankara has set an $11 billion target for defense and aerospace exports by the year 2028. Turkish defense exports have grown significantly in recent years, supported by stepped-up investments in the domestic technology field. Speaking to reporters, Erdogan noted that defense technology exports had risen from $248 million in 2002 to more than $10 billion last year. In the first quarter of 2026, he said, the country's total defense and aerospace exports rose by 12% year-on-year to more than $1.9 billion. Within the past decade, Turkey has emerged as a major exporter of high-tech defense systems, including unmanned aerial vehicles, naval platforms, and electronic warfare technologies. Turkish-built drones, particularly the Bayraktar TB2, gained international attention after playing a significant role in Azerbaijan's military victory over Armenia in 2020. In a related development, Roketsan CEO Murat Ikinci on Tuesday announced a $3 billion infrastructure expansion plan. The initiative aims to boost domestic missile production and strengthen space launch capabilities. According to Akinci, the company recently completed the first $1 billion phase of the project, which includes a $450 million fuel production facility in the Turkish city of Kırıkkale. Officials say the new infrastructure is expected to significantly increase Turkey's missile fuel output and support future space and defense programs. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev welcomed Kazakhstan's Foreign Minister Yermak Kosherbayev and Transport Minister Nurlan Sauranbayev on Wednesday. They discussed strengthening bilateral ties, maximizing the Joint Investment Fund, and exploring joint projects in third countries. Key initiatives highlighted include the Middle Corridor, the Trans-Caspian Green Energy Corridor, and the fiber optic line, underlining continued cooperation between Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is advancing plans to build 3 major thermal power plants, moving ahead without Russia after earlier cooperation stalled amid delays and financing concerns. The multi-billion-dollar project is now being taken forward with new international partners. Our correspondent has more.
Kazakhstan is moving ahead with the construction of 3 major thermal power plants without Russia's involvement. The projects located in Kokshetau, Semey and Ust-Kamenogorsk will now be carried out by a Kazakh-Singaporean consortium, according to the country's energy ministry. Officials say 2 of the plants in Semey and Ust-Kamenogorsk have already reached the key milestone, with EPC contracts signed earlier this year. In the coming months, the project is expected to enter an active phase. Key equipment deliveries are expected to begin in the 3rd quarter of 2027, with all 3 plants scheduled to be commissioned by the end of 2029. The scale of the investment is significant. The plant in Kokshetau is estimated to cost around $750 million, while the facilities in Semey and Ust-Kamenogorsk are expected to reach roughly $850 million each. Authorities stress that the projects are being implemented without direct state budget funding. These plans were originally expected to be developed with Russia's participation. The plans date back to November 2023, when Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister Serhik Jumangarin said the 2 sides intended to sign a cooperation agreement during an interregional forum. However, implementation was repeatedly delayed, with timelines and conditions revised multiple times, and Russia's role remaining uncertain. And by May 2025, Kazakhstan's first Deputy Prime Minister Roman Skляr said Moscow was facing difficulties financing equipment supplies for the plants, adding that Astana would begin looking for alternative investors if funding was not secured. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Georgia is considering setting up a state-backed development bank, but the IMF is urging caution. A News correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports.
The International Monetary Fund has issued a cautious warning as Georgia considers establishing a development bank, a state-backed institution designed to finance projects that private banks often avoid. These typically include large infrastructure, agriculture, or small and medium-sized businesses that may be too risky or not profitable enough for commercial lenders. Unlike traditional banks, a development bank does not operate to maximize profit or compete in the retail market. It usually does not take deposits from citizens and is often funded by the state or international partners. Its main goal is to fill gaps in the economy, supporting sectors that need long-term or low-interest financing. Globally, development banks have had mixed results. Some are considered success stories. For example, Germany's KfW has played a major role in supporting small businesses and green energy projects, while Brazil's BNDES has financed large-scale industrial growth. However, there are also negative examples. In several countries, development banks have been criticized for lack of transparency, political favoritism, and funding unprofitable or politically motivated projects. In such cases, losses are often covered by taxpayers, creating long-term economic burdens. This is why the IMF is emphasizing strong governance, clear purpose, and full transparency. One key concern in Georgia's case is that the planned institution will not function as a traditional bank and may not fall under the supervision of the national bank. This raises questions about oversight and accountability. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
In Pakistan, a new nationwide energy saving plan introduced by the government is drawing mixed reactions from residents. Many say the changes are disrupting daily routines and hurting sales as the country takes steps to conserve power amid the Iran conflict.
Shops and markets across Pakistan began closing at 8 p.m. on Tuesday under a new nationwide energy saving plan introduced by the government. The measure, announced a day earlier, applies to major regions including Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan and Islamabad. It aims to reduce electricity use during peak hours as the country faces an ongoing energy crisis and rising fuel costs. In Lahore, markets fell quiet early, with shopkeepers shutting down and customers struggling to complete their shopping in time. Many traders said the earlier closing hours are hurting sales as most people shop in the evening after work.
We are job-oriented people. We have to go to the office at 9 in the morning. In the evening, we reach home from the office at 7:30. Now, when we have come for shopping, all the shops are closed here. It is already 8 p.m, so it is difficult for people like us who are doing private jobs or working in banks.
Some shopkeepers also questioned the fairness of the policy, arguing that smaller businesses are being hit harder.
How will anything be saved? Every store is open, big stores are open. Small shopkeepers are being suppressed. Don't do this injustice. If you want to make a law, make it for everyone. Shut down the entire Pakistan at 8 p.m.
Under the new rules, restaurants and food outlets can stay open until 10 p.m, while medical stores are exempt. Wedding halls can also operate until 10 p.m, with ceremonies banned after that. The government has also reduced fuel allowances for public offices and introduced a 4-day work week as part of broader efforts to conserve energy.
Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to ease tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan continue. This follows China's growing role in easing tensions between the two countries. Our correspondent Tamim Bahi says more.
According to Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Chinese Ambassador Zhao Xing met Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi on Tuesday, where the two sides discussed relations between Kabul and Beijing, the wider regional situation, and the ongoing talks in China. The Chinese ambassador said Beijing is working to build trust between Afghanistan and Pakistan through a neutral and cooperative approach, and expressed hope that despite the region's sensitive geopolitical situation, the process would continue with goodwill and without violence. For his part, Muttaqi thanked China for organizing and hosting the talks in Urumqi, and also acknowledged earlier mediation efforts by Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and the UAE. The Afghan foreign minister further added that Kabul's position on conflict is defensive, describing the protection of Afghan territory as a legitimate right, while also reaffirming Kabul's commitment to dialogue. These latest talks come after previous mediation attempts failed to produce a breakthrough and after deadly border clashes increased tensions between the two neighbors. While reports of incidents have not completely stopped, the Urumqi negotiations have raised cautious hopes that diplomacy may still help prevent further escalation. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the strengthening Azerbaijan-Kazakhstan partnership and the Middle Corridor. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Relations between Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan are gaining new momentum, driven by growing trade, strategic transit routes like the Middle Corridor, and deepening cooperation within the Organization of Turkic States. As regional connectivity and energy projects expand, both countries are positioning themselves as key players in Eurasian integration. To explore this further, we are joined by Kuat Dombay, Director of the Institute for Central Asian Studies C5+, speaking to us from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Mr. Dombay, welcome to the program and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for inviting. I'm welcoming all your audience.
Thank you. So how would you characterize the current state of Azerbaijan-Kazakhstan relations?
I would say that this visit just emphasizes strategic character of our relations, both politically and economically. Actually, the visit of our foreign minister follows his first visit to Georgia and then to Baku, which is showing high importance of Caucasus for Kazakhstan in all its foreign, economic and political priorities. I would put it as one of the most important now.
Mr. Donbay, trade turnover between the two countries has grown in recent years. What are the main drivers behind this increase, and which sectors are currently leading bilateral economic cooperation?
Yes, the turnover between the two countries for the last year, it was showing $500 million, and the parties during the visit discussed how it could be increased to $1 billion. There is a lot of potential behind that. Kazakhstan is increasing its and building up logistical facilities in the port of Aktau, and the Middle Corridor project is just at its start. So we are looking at the estimations that the capacity would increase tenfold within the next 10 to 15 years. These are the data provided by the EBRD. So the issue is basically about ensuring that the tempo is being implemented. Also, there is additional incentive which has added up. I would say this is the building of, which is very important, the internet cable via the Caspian Sea, which will be developing also not only the oil and the hard cargo relations, but also in IT and other areas.
So how do you assess the potential of the joint investment fund mentioned during the meeting?
The joint investment fund, which is being established, is very important in facilitating at a more rapid and flexible mode, because because these are the two government issues. So having the fund which provides much more flexibility in implementing this project.
Mr. Donbay, what opportunities exist for Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to invest jointly in third countries?
Well, this will be discussed. I think some of this project could be implemented within the framework of Organization of Turkic States. The parties also, as I understand, discussed the forthcoming informal summit of the Organization of the Turkic States, which will take place this year in Turkestan, in Kazakhstan. And it could go over to the neighboring countries, because both in Central Asia and in Caucasus. Kazakhstan is interested in, for example, increasing its transportation of the oil, because we have seen what's been happening with the port of Novorossiysk, and we are increasing the shipment of Kashagan and Tingis oil to Baku. And for example, the Georgian port is very important for us also to facilitate the export of Kazakh oil to other Black Sea countries.
As you have mentioned, the Organization of Turkic States, do you see growing coordination between Baku and Astana within international organizations?
We have seen last year very important development where the Azerbaijan was accepted as the sixth country within the format of C5. Actually, Central Asian 5 countries turned out into C5 plus Azerbaijan. I would frankly say that the economic and political interests for the Central Asian and Azerbaijan countries are so much close that it makes Azerbaijan natural participant of all the Central Asian projects and integration, and what the region is doing while developing negotiations and meetings with the other countries, whether that would be our neighboring or world leaders.
Kuat Donbay, thank you very much for your valuable insights. We appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.